Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my very good friend and co-host Scott Keith, and we've got a special guest today. Scott, why don't you introduce your special friend?
This is Alexi Barrientos. He is another Little Rock comedian, friend of
Hello.
mine, funny guy, and all-around cinephile.
Anyway, we're here to talk about Fellini's Eight and a Half. Scott and I once talked about his film La Dolce Vita, but that was back when we were first starting, and so there's barely any views on it. I've thought about re-uploading that just because see if it would get more views now since we have a bigger audience, because I like that episode. But anyway, you can go find that one if you're not fully satisfied with Fellini after this one, there's more to be had. But yeah, today we're talking a very metafictional film, a filmmaker's wet dream, if you will. And what I mean by that is like someone like me who's a filmmaker and likes films that cover the creative process like this, especially in a very metafictional way. That's why I liked the final Evangelion film so much because of that ending and how it related to Hideaki Anno's mental health and how it changed from since when he first became a creator. This is something similar in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
No Evangelion without eight and a half. That's what I've always said.
No, actually, I saw one little scene in it. It's like maybe 3 seconds long that I'm like, okay, this is Pulp Fiction. This is the dance, John
Yeah.
Travolta
There's
and
the
but it's like it's like a 4 second that they do when they go kind of back and forth with each other when they're dancing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you see that too, and I'm like, oh, okay, another little.
Yeah, another thing Tarantino stole from because he's a fat. I'm joking, Tarantino, don't kill me. Also, just make your 10th movie. Why are you waiting? Just make movies. What is with this? I'm gonna retire bullcrap.
What a loser.
Anyway, I don't know, ego, dude. Um, no, I mean this is one of those movies I feel like it's one of the on the more avant-garde side of this, but there are those movies like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, even like John Hughes, where they're
Mhm,
so influential that like if you come out it without kind of the context of what the movie is and what it means and like the history of movies, like you
mhm.
might think other works are like you see it in a lot of ways. Like there's no Charlie Kaufman. He says he's never seen Eight and a Half. I don't even know if I believe him. But like there's no Synecdoche, New York. There's no adaptation, which is literally he had. I don't know if you know that Nicolas Cage is in it, but he had to adapt a book, and he was having so much trouble adapting the book. He just wrote a movie about adapting the book, and that's
Mhm.
adaptation with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
That's a lot more broadly comedic than this.
This
This
is
is
commonly known as David Lynch's favorite film, number one film.
it makes sense.
Makes
Okay.
sense, unless it's circa 2006, and then his answer is School of Rock. But other than that, it's usually eight and a half, and
Um,
totally makes sense.
I like what I love about this movie
Yeah,
is
why'd you pick this, Alexi? Go ahead.
I like this movie because I like movies that have a lot of people in it. Like Lawrence of Arabia, I love that movie. You know, because there's so many people in it.
Hmm.
And I love that this movie is about him, but also about the extras. Like the extras are there as well with him, you know, and you see them a lot. And that's really why I like this movie or his movies. Like a lot of his movies they have a lot of extras.
No, he does those ensembles well, but he's still kind of like Lawrence of Arabia. You still have that through line of like a
Yeah.
main character, but even despite that, he's able to balance that with the ensemble, which
Uh-huh.
is something
And people
not
are
a lot.
looking at the camera, you know, and he just puts it in anyways, you know?
Yeah, because it
Like,
totally in this scenario adds to the surrealism. And
uh-huh.
I mean, it's like, this is a movie where he's having a fantasy of a scene in his head, and then you see the behind the scenes of them planning to shoot this exact scene. So it totally
Yeah.
makes sense. It can kind of weave in and out of what's real, what's not. So, and then,
Yeah, and it's one of those things you have to accept. I mean, for the most part, you can tell what's a dream and what's not if
yeah,
you go into it.
Um,
But It also doesn't 100% matter all the time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is something I get at a lot. I want to point out before I forget, your movies that you've made, Adrian, are very metafictional.
Yeah.
And you correct me if I'm wrong. This is your first time seeing this.
It was. I put it off for 10 years.
Yeah, me too. I actually, it's embarrassing for me. It's one of those I'm like, I just need to get this done. Where I started watching it in high school, got probably like 30 minutes into it and just bounced off
You're
it.
not,
Like
you weren't ready for it. It's
I
okay.
wasn't ready. I just wasn't
It
ready when I
happens.
was 16, 17. I was not at all. And it still, I think it still piqued my interest at the time, but I just didn't have enough, not even enough like knowledge of film, but
Mhm.
like I didn't have enough life experience.
Yeah.
I'd never been heartbroken
I wasn't,
before.
yeah. Also, there's a level of just
Uh,
culture. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I had way more anti-Italian sentiment in my teens. I was
yeah.
surrounded by guineas. I do want to point out it's kind of funny that the guy's name is Guido because that just makes me think of the Jersey Shore episode of Always Sunny where they're saved by the Guidos on the boat. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not, but
No.
No.
Um, I
what's
like
really
that.
funny if you've seen it and just take my word for it, I'm not racist. Go on.
I like that the first scene in the movie, it's already like what is this gonna be? You know? Like he's in the car struggling to open it and people are staring at him. Of course it's a fever dream, right? He's sick.
Yes, but
Yeah,
But
yeah, it immediately
but
sets up his like
yeah, it's like
frustration.
what's uh-huh. And so it's like what is he gonna show us next kind of thing.
well, yeah,
It's
you almost with a movie with this many dream sequences, you almost have to start with one. Like you
Yeah.
can't just introduce those surreal elements like 45 minutes into the movie, and people are going to be like, "Wait, what the hell is it?"
you can if you're
Unless you,
cool.
yeah, unless you like really like lampshade it, like hang a like
Yeah, if
I
you
don't know,
want to
in something
be.
like The Big Lebowski, there's that dream
Yeah,
sequence
yeah.
when he gets knocked
Hmm.
out, but like that's obviously and that's comedic. That's completely
This
different.
scene sets up immediately, okay, this is how we're going to see this guy's inner thoughts, his consciousness of his frustration of what's going on, feeling bound, kept up. He's stuck inside this car. He just needs to get out. Everyone's staring at him.
Yeah.
I know that feeling very well sometimes, and
And
not
it's
just the creative
also
process.
I thought about like how it's like for him maybe it felt this way, but it's like the pressure of all Italy because he was so famous at the time.
Hmm.
And right?
Yeah, I can't
And
imagine because it's this weird thing where like there's lots of eyes on him.
like
The extras almost look like mannequins. It's
he's
almost that
dealing
way
with
in a
the
dream.
church.
Say it again. Sorry.
Like he's dealing with the church. Like
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's how much of a deal it is.
right.
It's like, what are
It's
you gonna release to the Italian public?
right. And I don't know how Italian film funding in the 60s worked. I know European nations, like I know France especially, they have a lot of like their whatever their equivalent to the National Endowment for the Arts, like their arts funding program. So I'm sure that's a lot of it. I'm sure he had to deal like with some degree of censorship. Also, you have to realize like they're like less than 20 years removed from Mussolini. Like, so
Yeah.
there's the whole, and I'm sure there were certainly restrictions there. And I don't know enough about Italian cinema. Fellini's the main Italian director I know. I
Okay.
haven't seen like Bertolucci and people like I haven't seen Bicycle Thieves. So like, and I know that
Classic.
he comes, yeah, Adrian, you like it. But he comes out of that Italian neorealism,
Yeah.
which is really interesting because this is the farthest from realism you can imagine most
Yeah.
movies being without just being full, avant-garde.
I
And that dream
um
scene, I also think it underscores like he has one of the motifs in his works because and La Dolce Vita is like a top. That's if Letterbox asked me my top 4 films, that's one of them. It has intense personal meaning to me, but um, I think he's kind of obsessed, and it's a motif through his work with modernization, with that post-war
mhm.
modernization of Italy, where I mean, however many years before they weren't even a unified country. I don't know when that happened.
Yeah.
and then they dealt with fascism, and now they're dealing with all this like intense industrialization and urbanization. And like he's not from the city. He grew up in like a smaller like provincial town. So
Okay.
I can imagine like having a panic attack in there because I'm an anxious fuck.
Is this the
And
first
having to deal
movie
with
you guys see of Fellini?
it. No,
No,
we did La Dolce Vita, and
Okay.
I don't know if Adrian's seen either, but I've seen. Have you seen
Um, which one? Sorry.
La Dolce Vita? Have you seen other ones though?
Oh, actually, my favorite, I really like 8.5, and I think is he is best. But my favorite, one of my favorites, is Divorce Italian Style.
Okay, I don't
So
think I've heard of that one.
so it's the same one. Mastroianni, Marce Marcelino, is that his name? Marcelino or Marcello?
Marcello.
Marcello Mastroianni. Um, it's him, and he's trying to get a divorce to be with another woman,
Okay.
but the only way that he can publicly like be accepted and get a divorce is if his wife cheats on him. And so he's trying really hard for his wife to cheat on him.
Oh, he's trying to like
It's
pimp out his
so
wife.
funny. The entire movie is him trying that.
That's funny. That well,
Mhm.
that's also another like Catholic thing,
And
which
dealing with the shame too of
yeah. Well,
people
Alexei,
that, yeah,
did you grow up Catholic? You at least grew up
yeah,
around Catholics.
yeah.
Yeah, you
I
you
am
grew up
Catholic.
Catholic.
Yeah, I'm confirmed. I mean, I don't believe anymore, but I'm a confirmed Catholic.
Sure. Yeah, we're all apostates. We're all going to hell in this um trio. But no, you have that dream sequence. Also, I can't imagine like we have drones and stuff now, but like filming the shot of his leg hanging off. I don't know if he just like hanged his leg off
Oh
a
yeah,
helicopter or if they built
that's what I was
scaffolding
thinking.
or
Or
what. That's one of
air
those.
balloon, maybe.
I don't know.
I really don't know. That's the magic of special effects back
Yeah.
then. But this movie really is about a man in a rut, and not just a creative rut, but an existential rut and a spiritual rut, all in one, all-inclusive rut.
Yeah, I think it's reductive. It's true, but it's reductive to say like this is a movie about the creative process. It's like yes, and all
Right.
these other things. It's about like you said, it's about Catholic guilt, it's about nationality, it's about modernization, it's about battle of the sex. Like it's everything. And I really think like this is Fellini trying to put life in film the best way he knows how. In a way, like it's as weird as it is, it's one of the best like representations of life I've seen. Just because in
Especially,
how much of the human experience it fits into less than 2.5 hours.
yeah, that says a lot about the last when he's in the car. Are we allowed to talk about what happens in the movie, right?
Yeah, no, we're
Yeah, okay,
spoiling. Yeah,
okay,
this movie came out in 60
okay,
63. If you haven't seen it,
okay.
dude, and you clicked on this,
All
what
right.
do you do?
So when he's in the car at the end with and his wife is outside, and he's giving this whole thing about life and what he gives and what he makes, and um, it's like I don't know. I had to stop a little bit and come back and listen to it again because it was like hitting a little harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
like,
trying to remember that scene, what exactly he says.
yeah, really long monologue. Um, but he's really talking about how he feels about creating stuff and putting it out there and how into the void.
I mean, that's what it feels like. Well, one thing that
Wait, wait. The producer is in the car.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the
that
producer
scene.
is in the car. The producer is in the car, and he gets in the car with him. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what's one of those things like that I really related to with this movie is I sometimes I don't know how to express myself in like a healthy conventional manner. Like you and
Yeah.
I are both comics because we're broken weirdos. Um, at least I am. And so sometimes it's like I don't know how else to express myself or my emotions than just like getting on stage or screaming it. or
Yeah.
or like even especially if Adrian and I are hanging out, we're constantly referencing movies. And you and I do that too. But like we even things in daily life, we're like comparing or referencing to movies or movie scenes
Hmm.
in a way that it's like I think it's I mean everybody does that, but I think there's a point where you're like, how healthy is this? Because
Yeah.
I feel like Guido in this, like as a director, he can only it's like the only way he can express things to his wife or communicate things about his marriage is through cinema. And so that scene later in the movie, um, where he's bringing his wife to the rehearsal and she's seeing that and she's like, "Oh, is this what you think about our marriage?" It's like
Yeah.
that's the only way he could have like expressed that. And going back to earlier in the film, we have him with one of the actresses he hooks up with. He's literally directing her around the bedroom.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know how to deal with her as a human being. He can only deal with her as like a piece of stagecraft. You know,
Uh-huh.
it also just shows like how he views women. I mean, some people are like, Fellini, his characters, they'll be like kind of misogynistic and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but he knows it's shitty. Like that's the point.
Yeah. That's why in the first when you said how you feel about being like creating something and putting it out there, I really like this is why I came back and I listened to this. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things he said is that the best I can do is put myself out there the way I am and hope and I'm hoping that we will meet in the middle.
That's all you can do, and you have
That's all
it
you can do.
because he hires a critic, which the idea of a filmmaker hiring a critic to like be on set or like be part of his creative
It's
process is
awful.
so funny to me. Yes, why would you do that? Why would you ever? It's like if I hired a heckler to be in the crowd, unless I'm trying to make a shitty crowd work video. It's like, well, no, leave me alone. I don't want to do that. But even then, he's saying like, I even wrote some things down, but like he's saying like the things that you're referring to are too personal. You know, there
Yeah.
almost needs to be like more of a cultural grounding, especially for Italian society, because it's god dang 3,000 years old or whatever, you know.
Hmm.
It's like he's like, well, you need more of a connection with more logic, maybe even a connection to Catholicism. But I mean, I think what the movie's trying to say is like it's the specific that relates to the general. You know,
Hmm.
if they wanted the general to relate to the general, I mean, they could just go read a newspaper or something. But like, and you know, I mean, it's Fellini. He's an auteur. He's the auteur. You know, he's
Um,
in cinema.
of the being sexist, I really like that scene where how do you call it a
A harem. Yeah.
harem of women and they're all like doing stuff for him, bathing him and making food for him. But then they turned on him. And that's why I know he's not really sexist. He's just bringing it up.
Well, yeah, and
This is
Well,
how
that's
it
just
would
basic
go if
media
you really
literacy.
had a yeah. It's
Anyone
like
that
this is
listens
how
to this show knows that just because of a character does something doesn't mean the director means that
no,
because
and we
it's
know,
that character.
but it is something I just wanted to touch on briefly.
Yeah.
But it does make a thin line when you know the characters are
uh-huh.
standing for the director. I also
Especially
want to
for
add,
Italians.
yeah, I also want to add casting Marcello as himself. I don't know. It's funny to me. It's like if I made an auto biopic and I cast like Brad Pitt or somebody. It's like somebody way more handsome than I. Because
Yeah.
Fellini's a dorky looking. You know, he's a director. Like he's
Yeah.
a dorky looking chubby dude, and then he has Marcello, who's like the most handsome man ever.
Yeah, it's kind of like what's the French guy? Um
Truffaut,
how do you say it?
Truffaut, Francois Truffaut.
No, the director, the
You're
other
gonna have to narrow
guy.
it down. There's a lot of
What's
French
his
directors.
but the guy that made
Anyway, we'll come back to it.
whatever. But it makes me think of like how they show all the technical stuff from those years, you know? How
Uh-huh.
do like cars work?
Uh-huh.
How um how like when you call like when you use a telephone, all those little kind of like little things are shown so in so much detail in these movies than I think now.
Um,
Yeah, well, I think some of that comes from the neo-realism, where like they don't need every like this is a big pet peeve of mine in general, really in movies is like you need fat for the stew for it to have some flavor and some like girth to it, and like if you trim all the fat, like you don't want that. It's like if you've ever bought like the 90% lean beef, it's not as good, if you're trying to
Yeah.
make it. And so, I mean, you have people like we did John Cassavetes' Killing of a Chinese Bookie recently, and there's a shorter version of that movie with some of the fat trimmed, but it's not good because like that is part of the content of the movie.
Yeah.
And so, like, and I think that probably like heightens the juxtaposition between the realism and the surreal because he's showing some of these details that are like, kind of tangential, like they're really not that important, but because of that, it's able to like give it an emotional authenticity that wouldn't be there.
yeah, and I like that. Like you were saying, like he has to direct this woman that comes to sleep with him because it could just come off as role play, and then you see that it's much deeper than that. It's like, oh shit. And then like right after that, we get another one of his dreams where he's interacting with his parents and they feel like he could have done more. And then he seems to like kiss his
Yeah.
mom and it turns into his wife. And then his wife says, "You don't remember me." It's already pretty brutal. It's like,
It's so on the nose.
and it's like, this guy is so he's completely burnt out to the point that the doctors tell him to go relax. And that first 30 minutes is some of the most stressful shit. I know it's like comedic and absurd in a way, but like when he's at the hotel and stuff and he's walking in a circle talking to a new person every 10 seconds is the
Yeah.
most absurd, like sweat inducing like shit. And like,
Hmm.
So there's as somebody I used to be a reporter, and like so normally I try to defend like good reporting and reporters, but like this is a movie and it was in La Dolce Vita too, but like this is a movie where I legitimately feel bad for the interview subject for being battered with not just a ton of questions but some of the stupidest inane pseudo intellectual questions
And
from film
asking,
magazines you can deal with.
yeah, it's like asking them questions that had nothing to do with the film too. It's like, hey, are you what kind of political affiliation do you support? It's like, what?
They mentioned communism a couple times in this, and
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. I know that's just the environment, like we're in the Cold War at the time. I don't know what Italy's really
probably
doing.
Fellini just sick of people trying to
Yeah,
make his art for, their own kind of subject.
yeah, they're trying to
Yeah.
take it for their own
Yeah.
political cause, and he's like, I don't. This is a movie I made about like me and my emotions. It really is not that political at all. I want to real quick. I just want to add something I noticed with that actress that he was directing before he made love to her or had sex with her. He wasn't making
Yeah.
love, but the he's like, your eyebrows need to be sluttier, and he draws those like ridiculous eyebrows on her. You see very similar eyebrows later with La Saragina, who is that big lady on the beach who's like part of his
Yeah.
sexual awakening. You
Yeah.
see very similar eyebrows. So
Interesting.
Funny.
I just wanted to point that out. It's a
It's
little detail
that's
that's
a
not.
good point because it's not because we do get that kind of backstory with him as a child, but it's not just one time that she appears. She keeps appearing in places that she shouldn't be. And I'm like, okay, that's bro's got a little like, yeah, it's an awakening, but also it's trauma. Like this kid should not have been seeing some
Tramp.
lady like dancing suggestively for all these kids. It's just like,
Yeah.
It's that
What I
thing.
what I love about that scene is when he asks her to make a slutty face and she just makes a silly face.
it's
She
exaggerated
doesn't
enough
know.
for him.
It's like make a slutty face and she goes like, ugh.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
really
she makes a duck face like she's on
yeah,
this.
it's really
She's
funny.
also she's also literally reading Disney comics in bed. And imagine
Yeah.
like I don't know. I couldn't, man. I could like especially if I were Fellini. Like I like women, but like I've been turned off by the way a woman talks about movies before. That's how broken I am as a human being. One time, a girl that my friend was dating, this was years ago when it was new, she said Joker was the best movie she'd ever seen. And I went up to my buddy. I'm like, dude, you have to stop seeing this one. Like, you have to break up with this girl right now. It's like,
I've seen three movies kind of
yeah,
person.
that's what it felt like. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, hey man, this chick's not the one.
But
She
you can
can't be.
like all on the screen is Fellini's frustration with you get the inside of all the stupid shit he has to put up with as a filmmaker, and it's like that that actress that's complaining that she hasn't had enough time to live in her character and is like complaining
Yeah.
about it and stuff. It's like, oh my God, dude. And that's and I know it's a comedic scene, but like it's totally believable, and he probably deals with all kinds of shit just like that all the time. It's just nonstop.
Yeah, at some point he pretty much tells her like, you know as much as I do,
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
and she still didn't stop.
and that's something I do appreciate about Fellini. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, but like he does really embrace filmmaking as a collaborative process, despite him being like one of such like a singular vision. But that's what makes it interesting. Um, Also, I mean, can you imagine like I don't know. I'm trying to think of what would be worse: dealing with actors who like are obsessed with like movie stardom and being famous in like more mainstream productions, or dealing with actors who are like artistes and like working on avant-garde films and having to do with that. Because I don't know.
I feel like they like um I would feel like this guy likes extras because extras you just tell them what to do and they're like, okay, we don't know shit. We'll just you tell me where to stand and I'll stand there, you
You
know.
don't? You think Guido does not like extras?
He does.
He does.
That's why
Yeah,
he put that's why there's so many in the and then at the end he's like, okay, everybody calm down. And he's like all these people that
Yeah, there
right.
is that shot of like 100 people coming down those stairs.
yeah.
It's interesting. I like that
And
when they're
oh
out.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going through the film in my head, but when they're all eating and then that magician comes in to read people's minds and
Hmm.
he turns out it's someone an old friend of Guido's. And when he attempts to read Guido's mind, that's when we he kind of uses that as like an inner film framing device to go start his like childhood journey,
Hmm.
and which I find that interesting. But we get a glimpse into his early childhood, and it's really just like him and all the other kids getting bathed and then going to sleep. It's pretty simple. And I'm kind of wondering why that's where he started because it really didn't. I didn't see the thematic relation until it gets to the beach and the woman later on.
It's the same place, the place where he's as a kid bathing, and then when he has the all those women with him, it's
Okay.
the same kid. It's like a kitchen laundry place, whatever.
Yeah, it's there's probably a lot of ways to read that scene. I mean, I think almost like okay, so I sometimes sex for me it's a lot of things, but like it's play. And I think there's some people who feel like it's the only way they can cut loose and like return to like it's going to sound weird, but like a state of innocence where you're like allowed to not fully be an adult and like go to like a more
Hmm.
base like sort of instinct. Like the example is always the stockbroker who hires a dominatrix because he just wants to just like not think or not be in control for something.
Yeah.
So I mean, and there's I don't know. I've never read Freud or anything. I don't know what the hell. I'm making this shit up as I go. But there's that. You save on location budget. There's also that. I think a lot of it though, it's contrasting like his childhood innocence with like the loss of innocence, and
Yeah.
it's just drawing that contrast more starkly. Um, I think so. With David Lynch passing away, I've been thinking a lot about like cinema versus language, cinematic language versus just spoken or written language. And I've also been reading a book by Tarkovsky called Sculpting in Time, where he talks about it. And they're talking about how language is in a lot like an inefficient way to communicate certain things, or like it's not suitable
Mm-hmm.
to communicate certain emotions. That's why we have all these other art forms, you know. I don't agree with that entirely because like it's not just the words, it's also the spaces like between the words that are important.
Mm-hmm.
But I know what they're saying. And when he says those, when he the mentalist reads his mind, she gets those like made up magic words that he says when he's a kid. But
Yeah.
she doesn't know
Hasta
what they
hasta
mean.
misa masa, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. And she doesn't know what they mean. And what we have to do, we have to cut to a flashback
Yeah.
to show like the full context and emotional weight of those words.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I just tell you, like, oh, we had some magical words that I used and there were these when I was a kid, like without context, those words mean nothing. But by putting them in context and you're able to show the entire like emotional journey that led to that being such a core memory, as simple as it is,
Yeah.
so emblematic of the rest of his childhood, then you understand like why he thought those words and why they're so powerful to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think thinking about David Lynch while watching this movie, I remembered a quote I posted on my Instagram story, him talking about this like a week or two ago, but it's him saying like and during a Q&A session, they're asking him like, well, how do you make movies that not everyone like either understands or gets, or they can't really see the whole big picture. And he's drawn to the idea of abstractions. He says life is filled with abstractions, and the only way we make heads or tails of it is through intuition. And intuition is seeing the solution, seeing it, and knowing it. And that was going through my head this entire film. And that it's just making sense of everything. Fellini himself trying to make sense of this while it's happening simultaneously in the film. It was like blowing my mind. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this rocks.
Yeah, the man's a genius, and he did. So I was reading, and he did have an idea, a rough idea for this movie before he did La Dolce Vita. Which, how you even conceive this movie? Like, it seems like it seems both planned and unplanned because
Mm-hmm.
it's so precise, but then also it seems so improvisational at the same time. I mean, it's genius. But it's like also it's called 8.5 because it's his in his mind is 8.5 film because he like co-directed a film or did some short films and stuff. Um, I think it's a seventh feature. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it's after La Dolce Vita is such a hit, and that movie's it's not anything like this, but it's pretty experimental in its structure and stuff. Um, it's like how do you follow that up? And the pressure of that is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane to me, and
Then what's
especially
next?
you're the Italian director. You're like if people like if I ask people on the street name an Italian director, like 9 out of 10 are going to say Fellini if they say
Yeah.
anything.
And it's also like that movie, La Dolce Vita was already so damning of that specific culture in
Mm-hmm.
Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So people bothering him, what's he going to do next? I don't know. It's just interesting.
It
But
is,
yeah,
and that's why you have people like not a fan of him as a person, but you have people like Woody Allen who are just like move on to the next project, like just go because they just
Yeah.
can't handle that, you know. Because I do think, I mean, again, I'll bring up Tarantino, like just move on to the next project. Like, what are you doing? You're putting so much weight on yourself, and that's like antithetical to the creative process. It makes me think of so I've heard this. I don't know how true it is, but I've heard this like done in like a photography class or a pottery class. I'll use the photography example, but it's like there's this teacher of photography, and he says, "Okay, so I'm going to divide the class into two halves. Now, this half, your final project will be one photograph, and you'll be graded on. And so I just want you to take one great photograph. And then the other half, he was like, okay, I want you to take like 100 photographs for your final project. And he said, like, the people who took 100 photographs ended up having better photographs than the people who tried to make just one great photograph.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. I think, and that's what this movie is. It's taking that creative pressure and like not only sublimating it, but like trying to get back to that like childlike sense of play and like connecting with like what led him to this life, instead of all, the bullshit that he has to deal with. Because I mean, I have that trouble of like when I'm trying to write something or do something, I get in my head.
Um,
I'm a real bad perfectionist, is what I'm saying.
but I do I can see how being a director is kind of like being a kid, because it's like when you were a kid, if you had a lot of, action figures, the more action figures you had, the bigger the scene was gonna be, and more action figures had different, stuff that they did, and it's like being a director it probably feels the same thing
Yeah,
at
it does.
times.
There's
And
a
sometimes you have this whole Lego set, but it came with just one guy. So you have to make up an entire thing about the guy being by himself.
Right. Or you mix and match it, and then you have the
Yeah, it's
Lego
like, okay, how can I
Lego
bring a
theorem.
dinosaur into this?
Yeah,
Because I
dude.
have dinosaurs in the other bucket.
Yeah, I want a dinosaur.
And so you have to like mix it up. And this is felt like that a little bit.
I,
What were you gonna say something, Adrian?
yeah, I just it's of course understandable to try and be the best artist you can be, but there's just a level of like we have limited time on this earth for one, but two, like on a broader scale, but two, like you gotta people just gotta quit being perfectionists because they'll just waste their time. I have a friend who's been tinkering away on Ableton, making sounds and music and stuff for 10 years, and he's never put a single thing out because he's so obsessive with specifics and just like, oh, well, I'm like, you just have to get the first bit out there, just put stuff
Mm-hmm.
out. And I'm like arguing with him saying like, well, what if you were like with a contract, you have 2 years to produce this record or something, that can all, having that pressure sometimes is good creatively. And he just disagreed. And I'm like, dude, you're just not gonna get anywhere. And like I get it. Like
Yeah, you have to.
it's a case by case basis. Some projects you gotta take your time with. Others, sometimes you can use that box you're within to fuel yourself creatively. But like just getting stuck and never thinking it's good enough to put out is so frustrating to me because I'd like to see this guy succeed and put some cool stuff out there. But he's like, I don't know. It just
Yeah, I mean, I think you might be talking about more than one of our friends. You might be, but it's one of those things like, so I'm really bad about putting stuff out. Like Alexa, you're way better at uploading clips and stuff, and I'm not.
It depends on what it is though. If it's
Yeah,
something that I care, then like I'll work on it and I'll try to like set a date or make a project and be like, okay, like what I'm doing now is like I'm gonna try to put out an album because there's like so many jokes that I've been doing for a while, and it's just I just don't want to fucking
you
do
just
them
got to. Sometimes
anymore.
you just got to get it out. You get
Yeah,
tired
and
of it.
I don't even use them anymore. So I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I gotta put it somewhere, and then move on. And like if it's not perfect, it's not perfect, but it's maybe in the next one it'll be better. Maybe not
I'm
perfect either, but
and I'm such a bad perfectionist. Like one of the reasons I do stand up is because it like forces you to get out there and fail a lot. Like
yeah.
I have to like force myself to get my ass kicked. Because I used to write short stories and I never sent any of them for publication or anything. Because I had trouble like finishing a lot of stuff because
Hmm.
like it was just I would put all this pressure on myself.
But in that way, stand up is a little easier because you get the feedback right away.
Yeah, well
But
that's what
if
I
you
like
make a
about it.
movie, yeah, if you make a movie, then you gotta wait until it releases, and then once it releases, you can't come back and re-edit.
if
You
you're
No,
can't
George
I
be
can't
Lucas,
like,
you
do
are.
oh,
I can't
like
imagine
yeah.
being I can't imagine being Coppola and like spending my whole life trying to make Megalopolis and then it just being one of the biggest bombs of all time. I couldn't
Yeah.
do it.
He
I
probably
would
saw it
drink that
coming.
whole vineyard.
It probably just felt good to get it out, and that's
Yeah, I'm
fine.
sure.
I
It
just
Also,
could
at his
have,
age,
yeah.
I have to trick myself when sometimes I get stuck and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make a big Facebook post that says this is coming in 2 weeks. Look out! It's gonna be a big deal, and that just forces me to. I abide by my word almost every time when I give myself
Yeah.
a release date for a short film or the same thing for my book. Like, okay, I'm gonna release this. This is coming soon, and I have to trick myself sometimes, and it
No, that's a
works.
good idea. Public accountability. Because, like, I mean, if I write, it has to be under deadline. Like, I have to, like, this is the stupidest example, but most recent I could think of. I've been applying to jobs. I got one in a movie theater part time and another job. But there were some jobs I wanted to apply to, and I was just having trouble writing the cover letters, which were, I'd written like 10 cover letters that week anyway. I was, couldn't see straight. But like, I was like, okay, it's 9. This ice cream place closes at 10. I have to finish these cover letters so I can go be fat and get my ice cream before it
I've
and
done
like I
I've done
was
that.
treating myself like a toddler, but like that's the only thing I could do.
Yeah, and it's like,
I have
Yeah.
to write on deadline.
oh man, yeah. Well, sometimes.
No, it's like I have to have some sort of guardrails like that.
I'm
It's
really bad though at doing that and then doing it at the last minute anyway.
oh so bad.
Well, that's how I was with homework
Anyways.
as a kid.
hmm
Like,
Yeah, homework you don't want to
you have
do.
this
It's like
project due for class, and it's like, okay, well, now that there's 2 days left, now I'm like, oh shit, that's gonna give me the energy I need to do it
Dude,
all.
that's why I couldn't be a reporter, because that energy, it was every day. It was literally every day. It was like writing an essay at the last minute. I'm like, dude, I can't. I did this for a year and a half. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking die. But I want to talk a little more about. Let's go into his marriage, because we haven't really talked about that. We've talked about his relationship with women and with his mother and whatever that means. But like,
Oh, there's one little part where like his dad is there and it's so funny because he just goes, Dad, you never really talk to me. And then that's it. Like that's all like and he did not talk to him. His dad just kept walking.
no, he was like in the afterlife, and he's like, "Do you like it here?" And he's like, "I don't know yet." And then he hops in a grave. It's awesome. It's also, I mean, I always joke. One of the comics in the scene has it. Like, I always joke, like, my dad is loving and supportive, and that's why I'm not a more successful artist, because my dad's like was
Yeah.
nice, And I have other issues. Trust me. Do you think how much do you think Guido loves Luisa, and in what way does he love her?
Well, it's obviously an issue of a lot of these directors putting their art first, and it's almost like they can't help it. I'm not making excuses for any of these artists, but like it's almost involuntary. And he does feel bad, and he does try to reconcile. So that is at least there. But
Um
he lacks a little bit of humanity in some places.
I have this little thing that I feel like I could see it that when he's not with his wife, he was very much like, "Oh yeah, come over. Yeah, yeah, you should come. Yeah, you should definitely come." Like the other woman is there, but he's like really receptive, you know. But then she gets there and he's like super shy. And it happens to me that sometimes if I have new material or something that I haven't done in front of my girlfriend, like something that I haven't performed, when she's like, "Oh, I want to come see you," I'm like, "Oh, but like I haven't really worked on this yet, you know?" And this like I'll release it to other people, but for you, it's a completely different, you know?
I hate performing for
It's
people
like,
that
yeah,
like my non-comedy friend.
it's
Like
like I have to come
Adrian
back
came to a
to
show recently, and I was like nervous the whole time, even though it doesn't
it's
matter.
like I have to come back home with you, you know?
But it's one of those things like if he can't when she's really there, he can't act anymore. It's a lot easier to act over the phone.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel
he's
like
super shy and kind of
he
hiding behind
wants,
the newspaper and
yeah, I feel like he wants to love her. I don't know how much he still does. I think part of him still does.
Yeah, and he's also just looking for he's desperate at this point, looking for anything he can to kind of help him find whatever sense of purpose and he's
Hmm.
looking for, and he doesn't know, I don't think, what source exactly it might come from. So
No, because I think people who are not that he's like hypersexual in this, but people who are hypersexual, like the hole they're filling is not the hole they're filling, if you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
but
Like there's always something else going. I mean, I talked about this with a buddy who shall not be named, who is, a ladies' man, but like, I mean, he knows it's a problem, and he knows it's like
mm,
he's trying to
um,
like
but it's
fill
like
something.
just like with everyone else on like in the film, he doesn't know what to do with her. He doesn't know where to place her in his life.
But
He
but
does.
that's because she's not an actress, and he can't control her, and he's obsessed with controlling his own life, his own fate, and
Hmm.
that of other people. And it's a very director thing to do, but like that's what his problem is, because he is so self-absorbed, and he does see all of these, like he does seem to have a love for the ensemble, especially Fellini. Not even Marcello, but Fellini has a love for the ensemble.
Hmm.
But if we're talking about Guido, like he has trouble not seeing people as an extension of himself, you know,
Yeah, it's
and
like
and and
you're
that's
in
the, I
my
mean, that's
movie.
that yeah, and that's how you get like terrible parents. Like the worst parents are the parents who see kids just as like little as mini me's, as like
Yeah,
extensions of them. And like he can't do that with his wife, and that's
yeah,
probably one of the things that attracted, him to her. And by the way, just point out his wife is beautiful. She's as
yeah.
beautiful or more than any other actress in this movie.
More than the other woman that he's with at the beginning.
Yeah,
I think.
well, because she has this like dignified air about her. Like,
yeah,
I,
Yeah,
she doesn't read goofy Mickey Mouse comic books.
I like this I like how there's one scene where he's telling this woman how to act, and then eventually he's like, okay, put your glasses on. And it's because his wife, I feel like it is because his wife wore glasses all
Yeah,
the
that's a
time.
good point.
Uh-huh. But I really love the scene where she comes into his room and he right away he turns off the light and tries to pretend that he's asleep. He's
I
like
think
it's like it's just now it's just you and her. There's no other people around, and you're still shy.
well,
You still don't want to.
it makes me think of like how many marriages were ruined during the pandemic and quarantine
Yeah,
because people who were workaholics because they secretly hated their home life, they had to like live with their spouse once again and
yeah.
like couldn't do. They're like, oh, I don't like this person. Just terrible. I didn't do that. I just jerked off a lot, but and got fat. But um, no, it's a terrible thing. And it's weird, like, how much is he trying to tell her how unhappy he is by taking her to that rehearsal? Like, he has to
Yeah.
know, you know, and it's like the most passive aggressive thing you can possibly do is like, how much do you not want to have a conversation that you're like, I'm going to make an
Yeah.
entire movie to not have a conversation with my wife? Men will literally make an entire cinematic production, then go to therapy.
I like the shot where he's overwhelmed because they've made like a makeshift production area at this hotel, and like he goes in to just to see what they're doing, and like a guy already there is like, oh, maybe check out my two nieces, maybe they could be in your movie, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he gets overwhelmed, and then he literally just falls into a bed full of headshots of like 100 women. And you think, well, maybe he'll get to relax, but then
Yeah.
his that woman he's sleeping with like is running a temperature, and she's acting dramatic and like talking about drawing up a will and like asking and just all being this dramatic, and then you see him and he's just not even listening to her. He's thinking about the next day and what he's gonna say to the cardinal in relation to his film and his the protagonist's character, and that says a lot. So
It does. I mean, I think he at least cares about Louisa more than other women, or at least about being at least semi-truthful with her, even if it's like through the rehearsal or what have you. Versus these other, I mean, yeah, Guido's, yeah. He's not a likable guy. This is why I
No.
hate it when people complain that protagonists need to be likable. No, they fucking don't.
No.
They need to be interesting. They make me want to watch them. They don't have to be likable. Um,
It's
and
like,
I agree that him drowning in the headshots, that's one of the best shots in the movie. I love it.
yeah.
Um,
It's like we get that childhood scene with him and the boys on the beach with that girl or that lady doing that mild striptease. But the more interesting aspect is this kind of stylistic way he's showing the Catholicism in this stark white minimalist kind of way, and like having to wear the dunce cap and kneel on beans and shit.
Hmm.
God damn. Like, that's not that my dad himself has told me about similar shit he had to endure at school, and he was born fucking 40 years after this, or 40 years after Fellini, you know. But that's just
your dad was born in 2003. Sorry, go on.
no, like he was born in 1950 something.
Yeah.
But
Even the steam house part, like that scene when they're uh at the baths, you know, and there's the steam. Even there he goes to relax. He sits down for like maybe like 5 minutes and then he gets up right away to just leave because he has a call. It's like
It's what
everyone around is like relaxing and living life, but
I'm trying to do some armchair psychology of like what does putting on a dunce cap in front of a class do to a child? Because it's a weird thing where
oh,
like
right.
it's I think it's supposed to bring you into the forefront so then you retreat and behave. But then I think with some personalities like Fellini's, like being the center of attention, that sort of like ingrains itself into your consciousness of like I need to be the center of attention, or like people are looking at me, I need to perform, you
Even
know,
if it's bad.
even if it's bad. And a lot of kids act out because like some attention is better than no attention,
yeah,
you know. I mean,
Yeah.
and it makes me think of it actually makes me think of Dan Harmon was on Neil Brennan's podcast Blocks, where they pretty much just talk about their mental problems with famous people. Neil Brennan does. And Dan Harmon was saying like they were playing this game like um of like a kind of a duck duck goose type game, and he was 3 years old and he was in the middle and everybody was like pointing at him and saying like you're the cheese, like that's some game. And he said like it's such an innocuous memory, but that memory had such a profound impact on his personality because just something was wired in him of like, oh, this feels so good, I have to recapture this all the time, you know. I don't know. That's I'm just doing some armchair psychology, but stuff like that makes me think. Making kids kneel on beans is terrible though.
yeah.
That's bad and a waste of beans.
Well, it's also like trying to go to the Cardinal is just another example of him trying to go to any other aspect that he can before looking within himself in the way that he needs to. He's, you know, that he calls his wife over because he's so confused, and then he goes and he meets with the Cardinal, doesn't get much advice there at all, and it's just like more frustrating for him overall.
What's a cardinal gonna tell me to do? Go watch Left Behind or like
I
God's
don't
Not
know.
Dead or one of those
But
movies?
also like every other woman in his wife, like you said, has been is tampered. And by that I mean by the system within. His wife is the only one that is unadulterated by the art that he's trying to make, the films, the
Hmm.
everything surrounding the film. And so when she comes into this kind of weird system that he's stuck in, it of course that's gonna stick out like a sore thumb and help him reevaluate maybe. But he tries, but it does lead to him at least somewhat understanding that maybe he shouldn't portray her like he does in
Yeah.
that footage. And he's a fucking prick a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that dude like it's like that thing about the Italian divorce. Just like, dude, just break up with her. I know it's hard. You're in a Catholic country, but like, I don't know. Can you just
No,
not?
that um there's uh the part when um like he's at the end, and they go, how do you call it? The mind, the mind reader, the mind
Yeah.
reader at the end. When he started gathering all the people and he brought all the people back into the set, and he's like, I'm done with this. But then as soon as the people started showing up, he just grabbed the thing and started directing like automatically.
Yeah.
It's like people are here, everything like he couldn't it just wasn't set up. That's why he wouldn't start. But once people were there in the set and they showed up and everybody was there, he just grabbed the thing and started directing. And it's like, okay, everybody form a circle, and like the musicians showed up and it was like, okay, you guys gather here, and it's like
I mean, it's a
Instinctive.
few things. I think it's like you said, he was going to the Cardinal or trying to get his wife there. He was looking at all these external things, but he was, I think it's like, it's about meeting in the middle. We said that
yeah.
earlier. It's like, it's because it's not just about what you can get from people and the people who are working from you. It's about what you can give from them. And
Yeah.
I think by the end, Guido has taken a more altruistic approach to his art, where he's like, um these people can't give me anything if I don't give them something of myself, and that
Hmm.
includes being vulnerable and relinquishing control and like delving into my own issues and dealing with them,
And yeah, and hopefully people will find that relatable. Like
right,
that's really what you're shooting for.
right. And here we are talking about it like 60 years later, so
Well, it's interesting
evidently it worked.
that this guy, you realize they keep talking about a spaceship, and you're like, what is he
Yeah.
trying to make?
Well, I kept thinking that too. I was gonna
And then
bring
we
that
get
up.
to the actual set, and they're building this for the film. You're like, what the hell? And you learn that it's going to be like the the spaceship within the film is going to be like a Noah's Ark for the last of the humanity who survived a
Hmm.
nuclear war. And it just breaks your brain because it recontextualizes everything. And you're like, what the fuck? Because back then, 63, when was this? 64, 62, something like that.
63, 63.
Sci-fi
Yeah, they,
was not what it is today. It was seen a little more absurd and kooky. This is pre-Solaris, pre-2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, it's cheap and pulpy.
Yeah,
And
so
this director is who you hired?
yeah, so of course you would see this and you kind of hear what the backstory might be for it, and of course people are going to think, "Well, this is hubris. This guy, this is sort of up his own ass kind of thing."
Mm-hmm.
And juxtaposed with the scene directly after, everyone's gone up to look at this spectacle, and he's down on the ground with his friend. And the quotes that stick out to me so much is from this scene. And he says, "I wanted to make a simple film, no lies whatsoever. I thought I had something simple to say, something useful to everybody." A film to help bury forever all the dead things we carry around inside. Instead, it is me who lacks the courage to bury anything at all. Where did I lose my way? I have nothing to say, but I want to say it anyway, which is the core of the film, of course.
hmm
And so
He has
when you,
nothing to say because he's trying to say it with words, and he can't.
yeah, exactly. And that's pure frustration. But like when he's saying it, and in the background is this giant spectacle sci-fi stage setting, it's just like,
hmm
Well, he clearly is being made to make that film. Like, he
yeah,
doesn't want to make
it
it.
just makes me feel bad for him, even though I don't know, he could have just
It's so
passed on
funny
the
that
project to
though
someone else.
when they
No,
bring
I was
him
trying to
in.
think of, yeah, what would Fellini do in like Forbidden Planet or something?
Yeah.
Like, that's an actual good sci-fi movie from that era, but or a little before. But yeah, there's a lot of schlock. That's so funny. I don't know. It's also just men of that. Just real quickly, just because speaking of sci-fi, I've been reading Robert A. Heinlein, and then like it's crazy, like as a sci-fi author, what was considered like progressive for his time today is still like slapping secretaries on the ass. I mean, I'm like 10% exaggerating. It's like even his admission of like women pilots in the military would be good, and then he has a character that's a stand-in for him with like three secretaries at his beck and call. I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't. Gender politics have advanced a lot. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, it's just he gives that genuine speech, and you start to feel bad for him, and then directly after that, his wife's telling him, and he's a rut. And then we get the scene at lunch the next day where there's that girl he slept with, and it's so clear and obvious, and yet he still tries to casually lie so hard that
Yeah.
he's never seen her before. And instead of like trying to tackle these head on with his wife and just come clean and try to work things out, he just backslides again into a fantasy. And that's when we get the most absurd sequence of the entire film, which we talked about earlier, where all the women in his life, everyone is in his fantasy, and he's a fucking prick. And
Yeah.
imagining himself in like a scenario where if you're too old, you have
Oh,
to go upstairs. Sorry, you're over the age limit. Like it's fucking Logan's Run. Like what a prick.
and how he's like, okay, I'm gonna give you your last light, like your last movie to shine, but then you're just that part of the old cast.
Because it's all control, like Scott said. Even
Very,
if
it's very
like,
Leonardo DiCaprio.
I was thinking that too. It was that Italian and DiCaprio.
Okay,
yeah,
there's a weird part of that scene that I noticed that they bring a girl from Hawaii, and they say, oh, you always wanted uh something like he always wanted a someone of another color in his movie or something like that, which was kind of an obsession of movies of that time, of having people like, or like one dancer or one singer in your movie that was of like that was black. But they
huh.
brought that in of like, yeah, here's the girl from Hawaii. You always wanted a girl from somewhere else in your movies, right? And
No,
it's
he's
like
he's he's definitely pointing out the fetishization that
yeah,
Europeans have of
uh-huh.
you know people of color. And because who is that? It was early in French cinema, some singer, and she was, I mean, Black American, but like who got real big in France for that reason.
There's this woman in Le Samurai.
Uh-huh.
She's the singer in that movie. Have you seen that? Le Samurai?
No,
We're gonna do it
Uh,
actually for this show pretty soon.
okay, I'm not gonna spoil it, but yeah, there's one black character in that movie, and it's a woman singer.
yeah, I don't
It's
know.
just
They
funny
always
that
do
it's
that.
like we're supposed to be taking this guy's existential trouble so seriously, and this is the kind of shit he's like dreaming about. It's like
Yeah.
cartoonish.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but they do turn on him, and him using a whip to fight them off is like
Yeah, he's Indiana
Yeah.
Jones.
garish. So funny though. Like what a prick.
Oh yeah, it's that weird thing where like I don't know. I think men are sometimes more complex than we're made out to be, and then a lot of times we're absolutely not more complex than we're made out to be.
Yeah, or a lot of times it's just like it's like I want to be myself. I want to do whatever I want and just
Yeah,
shut the fuck up.
but that's childish.
And you be you and you do you. Well, maybe not that way in this case, but um at that time and like like Catholicism teaches that a lot, you know,
Teaches what?
especially women being, pretty much servants,
Yes, absurd. Yeah, no, it's definitely a
Well, it
tradition.
literally has
and
in
it's
the end of the fantasy,
very
his wife scrubbing the fucking floor like Cinderella and saying like, "Oh,
yeah.
I was wrong.
Uh-huh.
How foolish I was to not understand this until now." Like, holy shit, dude.
And she's
No,
like, I
that's
gotta put the
even,
kids to bed, and she's doing everything. She's like, I gotta do laundry, I gotta do this and this and
dude.
this, and
I'll
he's
even say it now with the rise of like evangelical thinking in this country or the mainstreaming of it. We have this whole like trad wife phenomenon on social
oh
media
yeah.
where people are like, "I'm a trad wife" or "I have a trad wife." Like so it's
Nah,
still around.
you
So
you just don't want to get a job. That's what it is.
no, I want my wife to get a job, and then she makes money, and then I can make
I can
jokes.
make content.
Yeah,
He
make
has
content.
this fucking fantasy, and then he falls back to quote unquote reality in the theater doing the test. And of course, after seeing that, he's somehow shocked that his wife is frustrated of how she's portrayed on screen, and the way she goes at him. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, you deserved it, especially when she's
Yeah,
like, indulge
and
yourself, stroke your ego.
And then at the end, there's the like the actress that got away, kind of the girl that got away, because it's like where I don't know where she was from, but she came with another guy, and at the beginning you cannot see her because the light is behind her in the theater,
Yeah.
but then he grabs her and just takes her away in his car,
Well, it's his
and
in
then
his
she
brain. It's
sees,
like once I get this actress that I've been waiting for this whole time, it'll fix all my problems.
yeah,
It's just very
and
much like a
then he took her there, and she's pretty much like, yeah, you know what, this is not it. This is not what it used to be, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't want to be in Space War 5000.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and me be like sometimes, the best actress doesn't fix your movie.
No, no, there's
Most of the time, if it's a bad movie.
the
yeah.
specific dialogue his wife says when she walks out is so mean, but also so fitting for how he sees everything. She says, "You were right to ask me to come back here. We needed an ending." Saying it like, like a film. And then it was foolish of Guido to bet everything on this mystical figure that he had in his head of the perfect cast, Claudia, waiting on her. And then it's so deflating. And he
Um,
tells her he changes directions every day for the fear of
yeah.
missing the right path. He's slowly bleeding to death, talking about the character in the film. And she says, "That's how the film ends." And he says, "No, that's how the film starts." Like, this guy's fucking trouble, dude.
Yeah. Also, how he's he never has a time to think about the film. It's like you want me to make something, then give me a day or two. But they never give him time to actually think and put something together.
It's the whole thing's a shit show.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a curveball out here. I'm just gonna go wild. I'm gonna draw a line between Platonism and Christianity and Fellini's perfection. All right, let me explain this. Let's see if I can make this even semi-coherent. So I think that like the problem with Christianity, one of the problems, is the idea of original sin. It tells people that they are inherently flawed. And the guy obviously has some sort of um a Catholic guilt hang up
Hmm.
from that. That's we've already discussed that. Um and you also get some of these themes of like ascents and descents and like striving for perfection. In La Dolce Vita, you have the statue of the Virgin Mary flying over the city, but it's a representation. But that even goes back to the sort of Roman idea, or I guess it's more Greek, but Greco-Roman, whatever. It's all Europe, it's all one country. But of like the idea of a Platonic ideal where like everything that's physical on this earth is like a lower version of some sort of ideal form, that's
Hmm.
almost in this like realm of thought or whatever. And it's like you have all these things and they're actually sort of toxic because they make us not appreciate what is here. And they also like make you strive for something that just doesn't exist, and then you
Like
get
heaven.
yeah, like heaven, or just like the idea of perfection, the idea of heaven. No, I'm not talking about the actual like religious concept of heaven. I don't know. Maybe that's how you get Kubrick telling people to do like 10 takes to walk through a door because he's trying to get perfection.
Hmm. Well, I also about perfection is in the movie Parasite,
Yeah.
the Korean movie. There's a part the director talks about there's a part where the guy opens the trash can and grabs the napkin with the blood,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not blood, it's like red sauce or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he paid like an insane amount of money for that trash can. Yeah, it's like super expensive. And they asked him, well, like, why? And he said, well, that was the only trash can that I saw that moved in a timely way, that it was perfect with the scene. And he was like, yeah, it might not be a big, you know, thing, but once you make it and it's out there, it's forever. You can't change it. And like some like that, I understand the thing of like that little tiny detail that if you have the access to it, because he obviously had the money. Uh, yeah, you definitely do it. But
Well, that's
it
go ahead.
makes me
Sorry.
think of like the whole set of the spaceship. It's like how much money uh that cost compared to how much money actually cost to shoot the movie, because in the movie it's shot in real places you know with people, not in a made up set. And
Yeah,
it's like
I
how
don't.
much like the comparison of like, okay, do you need that much money to make a good movie, kind of.
Uh, no. And and I don't think that scaffolding costs that much. But well, that's part of the
Yeah.
paradox of like I've talked about this like anti-perfectionism thing, but also the paradox is like to be a great director, you have to be like an obsessive personality and be like, we need an orange flower pot. It has to be
Okay.
orange. It can't be
Yeah.
any
Oh,
other.
okay. Yeah. Not perfection, just attention to detail.
I guess. I don't know.
It's not the same, right? I don't
I guess it's not the same.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Okay, someone can comment. Like, what is there a difference? Is it the same?
Yeah. Are we saying anything?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
has this been brought up in the philosophical world already? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yes. Surely I mean, I don't know. Have we said anything that hasn't been said about 8.5?
Yeah.
But it's one of that's why it's a classic because you can talk about it endlessly.
Yeah. And like
And,
I like that Claudia says she doesn't like she says your character doesn't love anybody. He isn't very sympathetic. It's his fault. What does he expect from other people? And he says, I don't know that. And he says she's just like all the others because that's what she doesn't get it. And it's like, okay, dog. You're just digging yourself into a hole, man.
yeah, go shop at Hot Topic, you fuck. I don't know.
I don't know.
I is good. I still don't know if I like it as much as La Dolce Vita, and that part of it is that was my first Fellini, and that hit me. The time of my life when I watched that was very important. But I mean, you know, this I also want to draw the Fablemans into this, as long as we're making cinematic parallels. I mean, it's a movie that, like, the fact that I've been able to talk about it this much after only seeing it once, it demands a rewatch, and that's all I have to say about it at this point.
Well, I like that he doesn't get what he wants because he finally gets that moment alone with this woman that he thinks is going to fix his problems. And then immediately, somehow, inexplicably, all the producers show up in all their cars.
Yeah,
They
they found
drag him. They're like, "We're gonna have the biggest cocktail party ever for this movie. We're gonna talk about it." And he's like, "Oh shit!" And they're literally having to drag him on the ground to it, and like people are swarming more than ever, and it's like a nightmare. And this time the questions are even more absurd. Like, how
and
do you
in
feel
other
about the nuclear
languages.
bomb? How do you not believe in God? Do you think that pornography is an art form?
Oh yeah.
Like, what the hell? So it was like, as soon as they started asking shit about porn and like, will you ever make a film? Why don't you ever make a movie about love and everything like that? In my head, I was like, that'd be funny if he just pulled out a gun and killed himself, and then he dies in his fantasy. I was like,
Yeah.
I knew it. I knew it. That's totally a fucking
Yeah, he
movie.
goes say, look in your right pocket or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like the guy
Yeah.
within the fantasy like places it in his pocket. I was like, oh shit, no way.
that is so funny. And apparently, that was like the original ending of the film. It was going to be that scene, and then another scene with him and his wife that was kind of a dream sequence. So, like, the film originally ended on implied suicide. I'm
Yeah.
really glad it didn't end
I'm
on that.
glad it didn't either. And that's why
Well,
it made me think of the fourth Evangelion rebuild is like,
But maybe, but if you think about it, maybe it was because in the last scene he's directing, even though.
No,
No, I
Fellini
don't think he really
very
keeps it going.
purposely went with a friend's advice and changed it to the more triumphant ending, and which I like because I think the dour ending would be a little up its own ass, I think, and just kind of take it would take away from the film.
Films almost
I
feels
think
almost
it's
film student.
interesting that he couldn't see that himself, and that it took an outside presence to show him the way, which metatextually is insane.
Yeah.
It totally
Yeah.
makes the ending for me in ways that I couldn't comprehend. Similar, like we talked about, go back to our Evangelion cast if you want to check that episode out, but how it was his Anno's wife that pulled him out of the muck and got him to go to therapy, and that's why that ending is reflective of his original run on Evangelion. And I know that might sound crazy to compare 8.5 to it, but it's just how my brain works. And
I get what you're saying. I
yeah, and
I'm,
understand.
so
s-
like
I'm, s-
that to me is like such a triumphant ending, even though he's a very flawed individual. But for him to just snap to instinctively and say, "Oh, you guys go here, and we'll connect the final dots," I thought it was a
yeah.
beautiful ending.
It is one of the beautiful endings.
So that's what I have to say about 8.5.
Okay. Yeah, I love this movie. The other one I would recommend is yeah, Divorce Italian Style.
Yeah.
It's a comedy. And again, there is so many people in that movie. And there's like it's just a little spoiler. It's not a spoiler, it's just there's one scene where there's a lot of Italian guys yelling in Italian, cockhold, which is cornuto in Italian. And there's so many of them, and they're all yelling at Mastroianni, cockhold over and oh, it is so funny. You need to watch it.
All right.
Which is
I'll add that to the list of Italian cinema Italiano.
which is not Fellini, by the way, just in case anyone
Yeah,
was
that's not
confused.
Oh,
Fellini.
okay, okay. It's
But
just the same.
Yeah.
yeah,
No, you're saying all Italians look alike. I get it. I get it.
Oh, whoa.
I love him in any movie, so I would be
Yeah.
glad to watch that. Yeah, he's a great, and I love him so much.
He to me is there's like some actors that I'll watch a movie if they're in. The other one is the I forgot his name, but he's in all the Akira Kurosawa movies.
Oh yeah. That
Yeah,
guy.
I forgot his name, but he's in Seven Samurai, Yojimbo,
Yeah.
The Hidden Fort,
I
Hidden
think the word you're
Fort.
looking for is star.
Yeah. But he's in my, in the area of those actors that I will watch any movie if he's in it.
totally. Well,
Yeah.
I think that about wraps up our episode on 8.5 by Fellini. I think next week we're doing In Burgess. I think that's next, so look forward to that. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to support us, I have a book for sale. You can check that out. We have a tie-in film. I have a ton of episodes of The Harbor. We have over 160, 100, almost 170, I think. So go find one you like, share it with somebody else that's also seen the movie, if you want to do that. We have video essays. I'm working on two right now, which I could tie into this episode and say I purposely now record two essays so I have one if I'm not feeling on working it, I have another one I can flip to if I'm just feeling weird about it.
Yeah, Spielberg did that. That's why he was making Jurassic Park and Schindler's List at the same time, in case
Yeah.
he gets bored of one. He's a freak.
Check those out. If you're local in the Little Rock area, check these guys out. They'll be doing comedy many times throughout the next whenever. So,
Yeah. We're
Thursday.
yeah,
Well,
well,
I don't know when you guys are putting this up.
yeah, well, that's why we can't be too local because it's a
Okay.
little
No, but
too
we're on the road and stuff too. Just follow us on Instagram.
irrelevant.
It's in
Yeah.
the description. Scott K Comedy.
But
So.
thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.